Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Richard Bowser here, Property Investor News. Welcome to our first webinar of the autumn. The agenda, which is pretty straightforward tonight, very uncomplicated insofar as I will be just giving a quick update on one slide on the market as from a month or so ago, Q3 data, Q2 data, end of Q2. And then just talk a little bit for 5 minutes about the current magazine that's now at print. And then from David Kemp, he's the main presenter tonight. We've got Lau da Silva, who was the co-developer on the scheme that we're going to be hearing about from David. The project was actually featured in Property Investor News. So for those of you who are not subscribers, you may not be aware of this. If you are a subscriber, and probably you're on tonight to learn more about obviously planning in particular and development, but this is Lau's project, and you'll be hearing much more about that and the intricacies and nuances surrounding how that scheme achieved planning approval from both David and from Lau da Silva in literally very shortly. Right, there we go. If you're not familiar with it's Property Investor News, £8.95 a month is the subscription cost. We deduct quarterly. If you want to know more about that, there'll be a link sent to you if you're not a subscriber. And there's the office contact details and office hours 10 till 5. Someone sent me through a message on Facebook somehow on Sunday night at 9 o'clock, expecting to get a response on a subscription inquiry. Sorry, you know, there are limits, guys, but yeah, contact the office via office telephone number or through the website with an email, and we'll normally get back to you within 2 or 3 days, if not sooner. Okay, that's enough from me. Hopefully David Kemp is with us.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this evening, and good evening as well to Lau. Thank you very much, Lau, for joining in, and much appreciated to Lau and his partner Sean for these instructions and for working with them, giving them this opportunity to help them to make a 30% profit on GDV using Class MA. So this is the case I worked on with Lau and his partner Sean Harrison. The existing site that we worked on with Lau and with Sean, it's a mid-terrace site, mid-terrace property in London Borough of Richmond upon Thames. So you'll see there's a restaurant on the right-hand side, Tangawizi. So the unit is actually just to the left of that, and it's the shop on the ground floor, and there are uppers above that. So the Class MA that we worked on was just with the shop. So the shop didn't extend up into the upper floor, so it was really just the ground floor that we're talking about here, and that falls into use Class E. The shopping parade is designated as a secondary shopping frontage, and it's worth knowing that because that sometimes colours the way in which councils might approach these issues with whether or not they're looking to try to protect the loss of shops to residential, which they were in this case, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But also, as very much a town centre or shopping centre parade, it's well served by buses. As you can see, there's a bus mid-shot, and also quite close to other means of public transport as well. And so, surprise, surprise, it's in a controlled parking zone, the CPZ. So the council would essentially want any new housing to be car free if it possibly can as well. So there were other aspects to the application we had to think of too with Class MA. The site itself falls within flood zone 3, subject to flood defences, also known as, in this case, the Thames flood barrier. But that's also a factor, because when you put in an application for residential, moving from commercial to residential in flood zone 3, you need to think about having a flood risk assessment done as well. So those are the key aspects around the site, and the principal planning challenges Probably right at the top of these was the fact that there was an imminent Article 4 direction coming into place. So Article 4 directions, so basically it's a piece of paper which the council brings in, and it sets out where the council will take away permitted development rights. So in this case, it's not preventing a change of use per se from commercial to residential at ground floor level, but it means that you would have to apply for planning permission, full planning permission for it, which can be problematic because it's unlikely in a situation like this where you're in a secondary shopping frontage that the council will actually grant full planning permission for loss of retail at ground floor. There might be some policy conditions about it, but it's a lot more restricted than it is under Class MA. And that's the beauty of Class MA. It creates these opportunities where they don't otherwise exist in policy. And with an Article 4 direction coming in, you have to look at that piece of paper and see what date it comes into force. So this was coming into force at the end of July, on 31st of July, which means that we have to get our prior approval granted by the 31st of July. If the application went in and it was undecided by the 31st of July, and then they were in the middle of determining it, then it got determined after the 31st of July, say even on the 1st of August, then all of a sudden they could refuse it and say Article 4 direction is here, you don't have permitted development rights, so sorry, your luck's out, you have to apply for full planning. The same would be the case if you applied for prior approval under Class MA. It was determined before the 31st of July as a refusal, and then you went on to appeal against that refusal to the local authority. So let's say you got the refusal through after 56 days and it happened to come through on the 30th of July. So the Article 4 direction hasn't come in yet. And let's say you appeal on the same day, you submit your appeal on the same day. Well, the decision by the planning inspectorate would take place after the Article 4 directions come into force. So that would be an automatic refusal. The planning inspectorate would have to refuse the prior approval because the Article 4 direction would have come in by the time the inspectorate makes a decision. This is very important to bear in mind because we'll come on to that in a moment with shenanigans around the council and how we discuss this case with them. Thank you to Lau and to Richard as well, and happy to take your questions.
Okay, so so thanks very much, David. Thanks, Lau, for joining us. Lau, so obviously you're very familiar with what David has just presented. What might have you sort of done differently in hindsight with this one?
We have worked with David before for a while now. I know David. So it is sort of common practice that we run through for the light touch as there were several projects we missed out on, and this was one of the smaller projects, just very local to me, and there were issues. Obviously this is more about planning here, but the fundamentals of Class MA, applying that within a short period, which we had, knowing the Article 4 is coming in, was a bit of a challenge. Because it was a news agent with owner-occupied news agent, so he was only going to close the shop when he retired. So dealing with that and getting to the point that by that dead end, or leaving maybe little gap to any kind of delays from the council, i.e. they might ask for a little extension, or getting the whole process choreographed. That was the biggest challenge. But working with David, it was quite helpful because we could not afford to lose any kind of boxes unticked here. So that was a major challenge here. So I think David explained everything. I mean, the question, what would I do differently? In fact, when I bring projects to David, usually the basics are covered. I mean, as far as I can check, I would check little things like is it in conservation area, Article 4, flood zone, transport score, and that kind of basics are covered. So David can then sort of, doesn't have to go through. Maybe he can double check and then, give his initial thoughts.
I absolutely would thank both of you. Kiran, Ram, I'm sorry, we've got no more time to ask questions. All of you that have sent in complimentary comments about tonight's presentation, thank you everyone. But I'm afraid that is it for tonight. David, Lal, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Lal. Thanks everyone. Have a good evening.
And to you all. Thank you very much now. Good night.